My name is Yupari, and I'd like to invite you to this full-length portrait painting video where I will be guiding you through the entire process involved in creating this oil painting using the Zorn Limited palette. And here we have our model for the week, Joanna, and I'm going to keep an image of her to the top left corner of your screen so you can refer to it as I develop the painting. For the Zorn palette, we're going to be using lead white, cadmium red, yellow ochre, and ivory black. And if you'd like to know exactly which materials I'm using as far as the panel, the brushes, the oil paints, the thinners, the medium, all of that stuff will be typed in the description box below. So I'm going to start off by dipping my brush into some of the odorless mineral spirits and then dabbing it dry on a piece of paper towel. So I'm going to start off by creating a drawing color. So I'm going to use just cadmium red and ivory black for now. Just like that. And then I'm going to put maybe just a tad bit of the lead white. Just to get more of kind of like a gray, like a warm gray. Let's see what this color looks like. So we'll use this as our drawing color. And for an eraser, I'll be using a piece of paper towel. It won't erase too much, but just enough to get the drawing going. So I'm going to thin out the paint just a little bit more with some of the mineral spirits, but just a tad bit. Just to get this drawing color going. So what I'm going to do is first get an idea of where I want to place the head onto the panel. So let's suppose the top is somewhat around here and the bottom is somewhat around here. Just two little marks for now. I just want to know compositionally where things are going to fit. And let's think about the edge. With composition or with placement of things onto the surface, I usually kind of think about these negative shapes, the edges of the canvas or the panel that I'm working on. So I'm thinking of this distance here from the top of the head to the top of the panel. And I'm also thinking of this little negative shape here from this side to this side. So something like this. So let's talk about the gesture now. Let's use a little oval. Just a little oval shape to stand in for the head. I'm going to thin the paint out just a little bit more. So let's suppose that this little oval is a stand-in for the head. And here we have a little shape here for the neck and the shoulder. Now, the oval is going to give us a nice little gesture. So gesture is the movement, the dynamic movement of the pose. So if this is the oval, now the center line of the oval is somewhat about here. Somewhat about there. And I recommend being very loose with this brush. Holding the brush from the end and being about an arm's length away from the surface you're working on. So if this is the turn that the model is making relative to me, let's put in a little axis for the eyes. So just a simple line here for the axis of the eyes, giving us the angle that we will be using. So the axis of the eyes is making a little angle somewhat like this. And if you imagine this axis wrapping all around the oval like this. And then the same with the nose. Just a little shape for the nose, and you imagine the axis is wrapping around just like this. And we'll follow the center line down. Mouth would be somewhat here. And we imagine, again, an axis wrapping around. Now this is the gesture of the pose, the overall dynamic movement. And now we see here that there's a turn. Can you see that? You see kind of the top of the disc here. If you imagine this is a CD and it's turned a little bit this way. So that means that the model's head is turned this way. So it's turned to the left. And that means turn to the right of your screen. So you're only seeing just a little corner of the eye here, but the head is also tilted this way. Imagine a CD, I'm holding it and I'm turning it like this. Now the ear is going to lie somewhere in between the axis of the eyes and the axis of the nose. That is, the ear is probably somewhat over here. And I'm using another oval looking shape for the ear. And now, of course, the top of the hairline will give me an idea of where the forehead's going to go. So somewhat over there. Now I'm going to make that mixture again. So that was pretty much ivory black and cadmium red. Maybe a little more ivory black. And then a tad bit of the lead white. And I should say, if you don't want to use lead white, that is alright. You can use another thin white. So the reason that the Zorn palette includes lead white is because the lead white is a transparent white. And I cannot speak for people from the past, so I'm not going to tell you things I don't know. I only suppose that that was why the Zorn palette has lead white, because it's more transparent, which allows you to use more of it without making this too cold. So I'm going to dilute it a little bit. And by diluting, I mean dip it into the mineral spirits. So we have our mixture again. And now if you've seen my previous videos, you know that I usually don't start like this. I usually start off with large angles. But I really want to emphasize more often now the gesture of the head. This very simple oval looking structure that's giving me the turn and the tip that the model is making. Now let's put in some straight lines and angles. So let's focus on the outside shape. So we have an angle here for the forehead. And this curves into the eye socket. Curves out like this. See that? 1, 2, 3. And then this curves even further down here. So that's 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have another straight line here for the chin. And then this angle cuts in somewhat like this. Very simple. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 little straight lines and angles. And here we have the hairline, top of the head. And now I'm going to put in a little shape for the eye socket. So here's the corner of the eye socket to the left of your screen. Still following that axis that we drew out before. And makes a little shape somewhat like this. Very simple. You see that? It's almost like a rectangle with this edge coming out a little further. Very simple. I'm going to do the same thing with the other eye socket. Just a little rectangle. Very simple. Now I want to solidify this distance here. That is from the corner of the eye to the edge of the face. And the same thing is going to happen here. So I'm going to have just a simple shape like this. Just a simple mass. Now a mass is just a large area or a large shape of value. So these are masses that I'm working with. And I really want to know what this distance is from the corner of this eye socket and the corner of this nose to the outside of the face, because that gives me the turn that the model is making relative to me. Now let's look at the side of the forehead. So oftentimes I like to continue a shape or continue a line. So I'm going to just make this gesture like this. And I see that this line here is telling me that the shadow of the face comes out to about here, a little bit further to the left of this line that's shooting out here from the corner of the side of the forehead. So the shadow shape comes somewhat about here. And we have some indications here of the cheekbone, the zygomatic bone. And again, I'm creating that with just a single swooping brush stroke. And then we have the corner of the hair coming out about here. And I should say that this, what I'm doing right now, is called a block in. So first we had the gesture of the pose, so we had the dynamic movement of the pose, and now we're establishing the block in. That is, we're blocking the structure, we're blocking in the structure of the head with just a few simple straight lines and angles. And this is a process that you can do for several hours or several minutes, however you like, until you feel that you can get the shapes working just right. Now the trick is to know what to look for. Oftentimes, it's more important to ask the right questions than it is to seek answers. So again, we're still imagining that this is the gesture of the head, and we're going to follow through the back here to make sure that the neck is fitting here. So we're making sure that the head exists on a neck by imagining the back of the skull here and then how it connects to the corner of the back of the neck right here. Now I'm going to thin out the paint even more and get what paint is left on here, and I'm going to just put a little wash in here. See that? I'm just etching in a little wash for the shadow shape of the head. And this is only just a little drawing tool. Sometimes it helps to add a little bit of a value in order to see your shapes. So just simple light and shadow shapes for now. I don't want to overly complicate it. So I tell you what, you probably want to know how to mix flesh tones with the Zorn palette. So let's do that. Let's mix up some flesh tones and let's construct the volume of this portrait using those flesh tones and further solidifying the drawing while we do that. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract some of this paint from here, and I'm just using my palette knife to do that. Just going to clear a little path here. Now I'm going to use a size 4 Filbert Bristle synthetic mix. So again, if you want to know exactly which brushes I'm using, all of that information is going to be typed up in the description below. Now I'm going to use, for my first flesh tone, cadmium red, yellow ochre to give me an orange. You see that? It's giving me an orange now. And it's a nice and deep orange. It's not quite as saturated as, say, cadmium orange, but it's pretty good. And now I'm going to use lead white, and it'll bring up the value. And yes, I know that the brush is touching some of the drawing color that's on here. And in fact, it is alright if your colors kind of mix with one another unintentionally. You don't have to be such a purist with these colors. And again, if you really want to be a purist about it, then maybe mixing with a palette knife is what you'd want to do. But mixing with the brush, things like that, like this, see how this is touching a little bit of that mixture? It's alright. It's gonna just maybe make this mixture a little less saturated, and that's okay. So I'll tell you what, I'm gonna use this mixture that I just made to further draw out some of these shapes. So see that? I'm starting in right here with the glabella. The glabella is this little area here in between the two eyes. And now I'm going to use it to get maybe a little light here for the light that's on the eyes, the top of the eyelid. And I don't know if it's quite there yet. I need to get my shapes in check so that I can compare each surrounding area to one another. So here's a little bottom shape for the lower eyelid. And then here is the plane, the side plane for the cheekbone. Very simple, just a single brush stroke for that. And I tell you what, I'm using this mixture to help me draw. Now, I usually say that this is a false color, and I'm going to continue to say that. Let's call it a false color. So it is our first flesh tone indeed, but it's going to be a little bit darker, and it's going to be a little bit warmer than we're going to want to go with the rest of the flesh tones, but it's a good starting point. It's nice with oil paint to build lighter and cooler colors on top of darker and warmer colors. So see how I'm kind of clearing a path here now. Think about it like maybe it's snowed everywhere, oh there's snow, and we're clearing out the roads. See that? We're clearing out a path here for the surrounding or for the future flesh tones to appear. Just a simple little path here. And again, now for the side of the nose. And while I do this, I'm going to go and try to further articulate this shape. See that? And if you want to know how I get my proportions, this is how I do it. I'm not trying to copy what I'm looking at. That is, I'm not trying to directly like trace or project the proportions onto the panel. Rather, I'm trying to work with simple shapes and reason with these simple shapes. And this is how I'm reasoning with them. I'm comparing this shape to this shape optically by bouncing my eyes back and forth. But I tell you what, it's not something that happens. So getting the right proportions isn't something that happens right away. It's something that is constructed. And the nice thing about oil paint is that it stays wet for a long time. So it allows you to, that leeway to do things like this, where you're clearing a path here, and I'm not worried about the paint drying. I'm not worried about the paint drying. I'm not worried about trying to get a perfect linear rendition of what's in front of me. Rather, I'm clearing out a simple path for me to further construct. So now that I have this simple shape laid out, I'm going to go ahead and do something for this shadow. Now switching to a different brush, I'm going to first apply a little bit of my mineral spirits. And now I'm going to use Ivory Black and Cadmium Red. Very much like my drawing color, but we're going to make it a little bit cooler. So with the same amount of paint that's on the brush, I'm going to use yellow ochre on the side with the lead white. So now we're getting a more of a neutral green kind of mixture. You see that? And now I'm going to apply that right back onto this mixture that I had. Very simple. Now I'm going to use this to go ahead and restate the shadow shape. So here we have a little shadow right there. So let's make sure that we make it known that there is a shadow right here, and the shadow as well. Just a single brush stroke for that. And over here in this corner, there's a little dark shape right there. let's take some more paint and let's further delineate this shadow shape. So here's the bottom of the chin. So this is the jawbone. It makes a little angle up here like that, down here, and straight out. See that? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here we have the side plane of the cheekbone. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can say 5. Very simple. And I tell you what, it's easier to just go in there and make big decisions than to be timid and trying to perfectly calculate where everything goes. I don't know if that's more fun. Maybe it's more fun for you, but for me, I think it's just more fun to just go in there and try to figure out where things are very boldly, like in a very bold fashion, but also in a very simplistic fashion. So here we have the corner of the side of the hair. See how it kind of is reminiscent of this angle? So I relate shapes like that. So this corner of the side of the hair is very reminiscent of this angle here on the side of the eye socket. See this shape in relation to this shape? Maybe this is angled a little bit less. Something like that, maybe. I'm going to go ahead and just unify this entire shape. Just unifying the mass. And unifying masses just means this. Just kind of grouping all of that together. And I know that the ear was kind of covered, but I still have a general idea of where it goes. So let's just apply just a single brush stroke for now, following the same axes that we had before to figure out where the ear goes. And I tell you what, you can also use a horizontal line. So here's a horizontal line, and the ear lies just a little bit lower than the eye. See that? Now again, I'm going to cover all of this, so I'm unifying this entire mass with the dark color that we mixed up. Just like that. So I'm going to eliminate some of the glare with my fan brush. And this fan brush is just a large cheap synthetic brush. You can read it. It says the Fine Touch 3-inch flat. Very inexpensive, large synthetic brush. So I just use this to help eliminate glare, just by pushing the paint a little bit horizontally. So let's start creating the painting from the inside out now. Now what I mean is we're going to talk a little bit about the planes of the face here as we construct the volume of the head. And then after we get the planes all worked out, then we're going to be able to come back in with the corners of each shape and make them even more accurate. So I just added a little bit more of the lead white and a little bit more of the yellow ochre, and just those two for now onto this mixture that we had before. And I'm going to go ahead and just raise the value of this area of the forehead. See that? Just raising the value. And at the same time, I'm going to also be constructing another plane here. And this will be the first plane that we construct. And a plane, you can imagine, is just a flat surface in three-dimensional space. That's all it is. You can think of it as this panel is a plane existing in this room. And this panel is at a specific angle in relation to the light. So that's going to be important in creating the forms on the portrait. Now I'm going to let this move up a little bit. So I tell you what, this whole thing is one plane. Now we're going to add a side plane here. And I'm going to use a different brush. So this is the one that had the original flesh tone mixture, if you notice. using two brushes now. So I have a light brush and a middle brush. This will be my middle brush. So let's go and combine the yellow ochre with the cadmium red. Just those two. And maybe a little more paint. Just those two. And then I tell you what, I'm going to use a different medium. So I'll be using my medium for the first time in this video. So it is 1 part stained oil to 4 parts odorless mineral spirits. So you can make that mixture however you want. Say 1 teaspoon of stand oil and then 4 teaspoons mineral spirits. It is that simple. So I'm making a green. See how I'm making a green with the yellow ochre and the ivory black? And now I'm going to make a different color here by mixing them together. See that? And that's the beauty of the Zorn palette. The fact that you can go between a big variety of warm colors and a large variety of cool colors. And a lot of nice colors in between, such as this one. So we're going to create another plane. See that? This whole area, the side of the forehead, is now going to be a different plane. Just a flat shape right now. You see how it's now looking like kind of like a sculpture, where this is one area of the sculpture, and then the sculptor kind of took a chisel and carved out another area. So that's how you do it. That's how you work with the planes. But that's just 2 planes. Now we're going to be relating multiple planes to one another. So let's get a little darker. So a little cadmium red and ivory black this time. And now we're going to go ahead back to this green and add a little more of the lead white. And then with this same color, I'm going to go back to here. See that? More of the lead white. So now this is getting nice and gray. A nice and gray color. Now let's add some more cadmium red back into it. Something like that. And now we have this plane here. And let's let this whole plane go all the way down here. See how that's starting to create a little bit of form from here to here to here. And then to add more information, let's get into some of the lighter lights. So here we have the lead white and the yellow ochre. And just those two for now. I don't want to use straight white, so just this mixture here. And here we have a highlight, more like a light region of the forehead. And then we have another light right here on the frontal ridge. This whole little area here is the frontal ridge. Now that's starting to create a little bit more volume. Now I'm going to go ahead and follow through this form here. Using the middle brush, I'm going to go ahead to this value here and make it a little bit more pink. So using just cadmium red with that and the lead white. A little more cadmium red. Let's see what this value looks like. And it might need more cadmium red. A little more cadmium red, some more lead white. A little warmer, that's all right. So I'm going to go ahead and cover this entire shape here now for the side of the cheekbone. And I'm also going to use it for the side plane of the nose. And I'm going to make it just a little bit more on the orangey side by mixing the yellow ochre and the cadmium red right here on a different puddle. So just adding a flat plane here And we're building the structures from the inside out. So I'm trying to create these planes to create the volume of the portrait. And then I'm going to hone in on those planes and make them more exacting later. So there's going to be a tad bit more pink. So the cadmium red and the lead white. Purposefully not cleaning the brush so that it's not overly saturated, that pink. So here's the pink. So a little bit more pink right here. And as we get further down here, it's going to get even more cooler. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So let's use the ivory black that's kind of starting to fall down here. And the the lead white. Wow, I haven't even used titanium white in a long time. I really like these transparent whites. And a little bit of the yellow ochre. And the lead white is allowing me to use a lot more of it without losing the integrity of my pigment. So here's this cooler plane. I'm going to make this mark and I'm going to stand back. That is way too cold. So I'm going to mix this color here. And I'm going to unify this entire little shape on my palette. And I'm going to go ahead onto this green that I had before. See how I'm kind of using now different puddles on the palette. Using this puddle here to get a little more warmth. And that's a little better. But I think it needs to be darker. So ivory black, not that much. Cadmium red. Back to the ivory black. A little more yellow ochre. Just juggling these two colors right now until I get the values that I want. Notice now how the values on the palette are starting to get darker as it falls down the palette. And I'm kind of doing that on purpose just so that I can reason within the value ranges on my palette before I put the values onto the painting. So let's see how this value does. It's a little bit better. So it's getting darker as it rolls around the side there. I tell you what, you can also, see this? You can also make the shadow shape a little bit more finely delineated at the same time. So I have the same brush that I used for the shadow shape, and I'm using it now to get more of a exacting shape here now for the side plane of the face. This comes a little further down, just like that. So now with this same color that I had up here, I'm going to go ahead and create the plane for the orbicularis oris. This shape right here. So this plane is going to be encompassing the entire structure of the mouth. See how it makes a little, kind of like a W shape? And that will give the volume of the mouth. Don't worry, we're going to apply the mouth back on, but I'm just creating the structure so that I can build on top of it. And I'm just going to go ahead and flatten this out too. Just like that. Now we're going to switch to some smaller brushes. These are size 1 round synthetic brushes. So I'm going to have a light brush and a dark brush. So let's just use the light that's on here. And we are going to construct the light and dark patterns for the eyes. So there's a little more light up here. So there's more light hitting here, creating this plane. And then the same thing is going on over here, so it's just a little bit higher up. More light is hitting this area. And now I'm going to go ahead and switch to the dark brush. Let's take some of the dark that's on here, maybe a little more ivory black, and some yellow ochre, just to ensure that I'm not making something that's straight black. And then maybe put some cadmium red onto that mixture. See how I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between puddles? So let's place now a brush stroke for the tear duct. So here's one tear duct for the eye to the left of your screen. And here is the light beneath that tear duct. And I'm really just trying to focus on the light and dark patterns to further construct the shapes for the eyes. And then once I have the shapes for the eyes, then I'm going to use these shapes to help me relate the surrounding shapes. So I'm kind of cautious not to get too gray with this. So I'm going to actually go ahead and take some of the pink that's on here. A little bit more of a warmer color here, just to ensure that I don't get too gray there. Now here, like I said before, the tear duct. Let's compare this tear duct to the other eye. And you can't actually see the other tear duct. It's a little bit covered by the side of the nose. So instead, we have just a corner of the eye that's just a little bit up here. And again, that's because the head is tilted. And now we have the back, the furthest point left of the eye, just somewhat over there. Then a shape for the top of the eyelid. And then see that? The eye is just a simple line right now. 1, 2, 3. Just a simple shape like that. Now let's look at the dark shape of the shadow here. So this mask that we used is good. But now there's a little bit more of a little triangle up here. So it goes like this, and then down. This goes up and then down. So a little bit up, then down. And then the same with the other eyebrow. This shape is kind of resting a little bit higher up. And I'm just trying to relate these shapes to one another. I'm not trying to perfectly copy them. I'm trying to relate them. And I'm going to use the same color now to get an idea of where the pupil is going to fit. So again, single brush stroke here. And then let's guesstimate the pupil might go about there. Bottom of the eye. And the same thing with the other side. Let's guesstimate. The pupil goes about here. Just a bunch of guesstimations. Series of approximations. And then there's a little shape here. Little line. Let's just put that in. Why not? Might be in the wrong place completely, but let's just see how it works. Then we have the bottom of the eye. See how simple we're constructing the eye? So the bottom eyelid, 1, 2, 3. And let's take some of the paint off of here. It can be that simple. So using a vertical line, I see that the nose is just a little bit further to the right relative to this tear duct on a vertical. And so that little guesstimation in the beginning is just about right. The shadow shape for the nose might have to move a little bit higher up, but I'm not entirely sure. But I'm going to create the wing of the nose first to help me further solidify that shadow shape. So I'm going to take a different brush. So this is going to be my middle tone brush. I'm going to take some of the paint off of this puddle here and mix it into this puddle. Now I don't want it to be too dark, but something like this might work. So let's see. Maybe it's too pink. So let's take some of this color here. Notice how I'm kind of going back and forth between the puddles. So let's see. That's a little better. So let's create this little wing of the nose. So here's the wing of the nose. And I'm going to use this now to help me solidify the shadow shape. So the same brush that I had for these darks, I'm going to use now to further solidify the shape. So this comes in a little bit more like this. See that? Kind of wraps into the wing. Let's eliminate some of the glare. And let's add a little more ivory black into this mixture. And a little more of this greenish tone. Mixing them together just so I don't get something that's too dark. And so now let's carve into this shape. So I'm going to use this brush here that I used for these lights. So I'm going to take off some of the paint that's here. Now I'm going to go to the corner, try and create this shape. So I'm trying to draw with the paint. So this comes down here and then up here. It makes almost like a little triangle coming down here. Kind of looks like a Batman, like the Batman sign. Maybe I'm just seeing things. So this wraps up a little bit higher here. And then the corner of the side of the nose. So the bulb of the nose is here, and it's kind of touching the side of the cheek. Just optically, this side of the nose touches there. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little bit more of the cadmium red with the yellow ochre, and I'm trying to draw with these colors, and I'm going to go back in and further refine the color relationships. So I'm going to further refine the colors in relation to one another, but only after I have these large shapes working out in relation to one another. There's a little bit more with the orange there just to push that over. Now the bottom of the bulb of the nose. So the bulb is this little thing here. So the bottom of the bulb of the nose, I'm going to make kind of like a circular motion here. Follows a little bit further down here. Something like that. And again, these are my first guesstimations as to this shape. And I'm doing it with the oil paint. So this comes up further here. And then perhaps the shadow shape might have to push up a little bit here. And again, I'm trying to reason with these shapes. And then let's just take some of this light here and then add the highlight just to get an idea of where things are fitting. So adding in these values helps me to further reason with the shapes. So there's a little more light over here, not quite in highlight, so let's bring it down a notch. Something like that. And now I'm going to clear a path over here to add the mouth. So I'm going to use a little more yellow ochre. Let's say over here. And the lead white. maybe a touch of the green that's over here. And more lead white. And I'm going to clear a path here now for the addition of the mouth. So this is the top plane of the orbicularis oris, is this entire structure here that's encompassing the mouth. So this little area, I perceive it to be a little more on the greenish side. So I'm going ahead and making that color decision. And let's say that the bottom of the mouth goes about here. Not entirely sure, but I do want to make sure that it follows the center line of the face, just to make sure that the features line up with one another. So if that's the top of the upper lip, then the bottom goes out somewhat like this. And again, to place the lip, I'm thinking of the center line going across here, and I'm thinking of the distance between the middle of the bottom of the nose and the top middle of the upper lip. Now I'm going to switch back into my dark brush, and I'm going to go into this puddle here, and I'm actually going to add some more of the cadmium red. So just to make it a little bit warmer. Now let's say that the middle of the lip is here. Might be a little bit higher, so I have to make a little mark like this and then stand back. It's almost like you imagine you're kind of chopping up a piece of plywood, and then you place, say, a pencil mark, and then you have to, like they say, measure twice, cut once. So it really helps to stand back when you do these kind of placements. So now the corner of the mouth on a vertical, it almost matches up with the corner of the nose. Like this, see, this vertical gesture, but it's a little bit further to the left. So something like that for the side of the mouth. And then this goes up here. Maybe it makes a shape something like that. Not entirely sure yet. I'm going to make a vertical gesture, and maybe the mouth is a little bit further to the left. Not sure yet. I have to have the shapes there so I could reason with them. Bottom of the lip. Something like that. Now we're going to add a little more structure, and at the same time we're going to be adjusting these colors. So let's start from the lighter colors. So let's use a little bit of the lead white here onto this color that's already on here. And let's go ahead and raise this value yet again. And in doing this, we're going to be adding another plane. And so as we move around here, there's going to be a little shape right here. And I mentioned it earlier. So this is the frontal ridge. So this plane right here is the frontal ridge of the forehead. And then as we get a little bit higher up, the color, the hue tends to get a little more on the pinkish side. So just a touch of the cadmium red onto that mixture. And now it's a little bit more pink. And using the color that was already laid down before, remember I wanted to start off a little bit darker and warmer, is allowing me to build these colors on top of them. So I'm just going to modify that shape a little bit. So we're still working from the inside out. So I'm going to come back in later on and kind of carve this outside shape with the background color a little bit more solid. So again, a little bit more light there. So maybe some more yellow ochre with the lead white. Let's get this plane back. And now I'm going to follow through on the other side. So I tell you what, try and blur your eyes to see color. and squint to see value. So blurring my eyes, this plane here is a little bit cooler than these. So I'm going to go into this area of the value scale on the palette. Adding just the lead white should cool it down a little bit. So let's see what this value is. It's too dark for this area, but it might actually work for this little area here as it gets even further away from the light. So now let's keep building this color. So more lead white, a little bit more of the cadmium red, some yellow ochre, and let's just juggle these colors around until we get the value that we want. So maybe about there. Now I want it to be a little bit more on the orangey side. So on the corner of the palette, I'm mixing cadmium red and yellow ochre. I'm going to add that back onto here. And now we're going to create this plane. So here is yet another plane. Just like that. And then it's actually a little bit darker over here. So over here, it's actually a tad bit darker. And then lighter as it gets closer. Let's just take something that's on the palette there. A little bit more of these colors. And it gets lighter as it gets closer to this light. And it gets a little bit pinker over here, so back to the cadmium red and the lead white. It's a little bit pinker here still, but not that dark. So more of the lead white. Creating that plane just like that. So color-wise, I'm noticing that this area is pinker actually than this area. But this area is a little bit more pink than this area. Value-wise, I know that this area here beneath this frontal area of the skull, this little area here, is a little bit darker than this, but not that much. So I'm going to go back in with the light brush and further refine that value change. So we're working with color and we're working with form at the same time. And so this little transition is a little bit lighter here actually. So let's take some of the yellow ochre onto this area of the palette, some more lead white, tad bit of ivory black. So this whole area here is still a little bit lighter, creating this plane, getting a little plane change there. See how reasoning with these planes and these values is starting to create even more of the impact of the form. Now I'm going to switch to the little side here. So there's a certain shape here that is giving me a plane that's turning away from the light. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different brush. And I'm going to designate this brush my dark middle brush. That's a lot to say, but it's just a middle tone brush. That's just a little bit darker. That's all it is. So I just used yellow ochre and a little bit of ivory black onto this area of the palette. And let's see if we can get this value. So again, this shape is making a very definitive, kind of like a S, like an elongated S curve. Something like that. And then this area is now a different plane. and it's a little bit cooler, I think. Think is the keyword. I'm just reasoning with these shapes. So I'm adding just a little bit of the lead white, tad bit of the yellow ochre onto this puddle, and let's see what happens. And that's a little bit closer to what I want. That's also helping to solidify this plane change. But I don't want to forget the values getting darker as it rolls away from the light. So I'm going to go ahead and darken this transition, making sure that transition stays a little dark. And then I'm going to build some more of the planes onto here. So it's kind of like a deep orange here. So let's say yellow ochre, cadmium red, a little more cadmium red onto this mixture. Let's see what it does. Creates another plane right here. It's getting darker and a deeper pink over here. So I'm switching back to that darker middle brush. And let's just create that plane change. See that single brush stroke to get that going. And I tell you what, I'm going to add even more cadmium red to it. And move a little higher up on the palette. And I'm going to add that pink right here. Make it even more pink. Now switching to the light brush, I perceive this little plane here to be more yellow. So let's just take this color up here and add this plane. See that? Just now a top plane for the cheekbone. A top plane for the structure of the cheek. And then there's even a little connecting plane here. I have to really squint down to see what value that is. I think this value is lighter. Color-wise, I think it's a little more of a neutral pink. So back to the cadmium red. Let's take a touch of this just to neutralize it. A little bit more lead white. And let's see what this value does. So I'm just spreading the tone onto here, making the edge a little bit softer as it goes down by applying less pressure. Now I'm going to add more of the lead white and yellow ochre. Just the lead white and the yellow ochre to try and get this light. Makes a very definitive shape. Try to look out for the shapes of each value as well. I'm going to use that to add on to here. It's actually a little bit cooler, so let's take some of this puddle here and add more lead white to it. So let's add that shape. Maybe there's too much white there. Let's add that shape just like that. And now there's a little softer transition there, and it's also cooler, I perceive, right there. So I'm going to use the ivory black on top of this puddle here. Maybe mix with some of that orange there. Gonna roll the brush around. So let's try and get that value. See that? It starts to soften the transition. And this also continues, this shape actually continues up into here. Now after standing back, I see that this shape might actually need to get a little bit bigger and then a little bit darker. So let's go into the ivory black, into this area of the palette. A little bit more ivory black. A little more of the yellow ochre onto this little puddle here. And it might be too green, not sure, but let's see. It's just a little touch there. And that might actually work. No, maybe a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter, a little bit warmer. So let's see. This shape needs to come up a little bit. So where's the peak of convexity? The peak of convexity is here where that highlight was. Was is the key word because I don't know what happened to it. The highlight is gone. But that's okay. An oil painting is pretty much a, like they say, 2 step forward, 1 step back kind of thing. So somewhere along the line it lost this highlight. So let's just place it back in there, just like that. Very simple. Now the peak of convexity for the eyebrow, meaning the top of the curve of the eyebrow, somewhat about here, a little bit to the left of that highlight. So this comes out like this. So I'm standing very far back to see where these changes need to be made. This comes down a little bit like this. Then let's make it a little bit warmer. Tad bit warmer. Let's get into this. So this is now going to be for this bottom area of the eyelid. I think it's a little bit darker. Very much just a touch there. And there's a little bit more of a dark pathway here. And then I'm going to use this same dark mixture to adjust this shape. Now I noticed it needs to move up a little bit, and so does the mouth correspondingly. So this comes up like this, very simply. Just a single brush stroke. Remember those lines we talked about before? 1, 2, 3, 4. Simple straight lines and angles. Let's make that little transition a little softer. So this has to come up just a little bit. So it's kind of nice when you keep your shapes simple and easy to work with, because then when changes like this need to happen, changes are simple and easy to understand. It's much easier to move up a line than it is a completely finished outline. This comes in around like this, and we're still working from the inside out, trying to get these forms to grow, to develop, and then I'm going to come back in and get more refinement on the outside shapes. And so now I'm going to work these little planes here. So it's a little bit lighter and a little bit cooler over here. So let's go into the yellow ochre and the ivory black. And let's see what this mixture does. And it's kind of making it lighter. Not really. So let's add some more of the lead white. The yellow ochre. Let's see what happens with this value. There we go. It's a little bit lighter and a little bit cooler. And while we're doing this, we're also solidifying the drawing too. So now we have this little shape here, but now we have to focus on this corresponding shape. So I like to work my shapes side by side. So it's a little bit darker here and a little bit more on the orangey side. So let's just go into this puddle and see what happens. It's kind of working, so let's apply the paint here. And it might need to get lighter and more pink over here. So the cadmium red and the lead white. See how nice it is to have a transparent white? Because you can use a lot of it and still maintain the depth of your color. So a little bit lighter and a little bit more pink here. You can now see this plane is starting to emerge. So let's make it a little bit pinker and a little bit darker. But not too much for this shape right here. Just like that. Now let's keep on developing the structures of the muzzle of the mouth, or the orbicularis oris. So it's going to get a little bit lighter over here. So I'm switching to the ivory black and the yellow ochre to make it a little cooler, but not too much. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this plane here for the chin. See that? I'm also kind of still moving the mouth a little bit higher up. It's important to keep your shapes simple and easy for you to understand, so that when you're kind of indecisive about where they need to go, it's easy to test them out. A little bit higher up, a little bit lower down, not quite sure, but you're able to reason with the shapes, and that's the important thing. So I'm creating this little volume here for the mouth. It's a little bit lighter here. Something like that. It's important to be able to see the structures. A good friend of mine said that in the beginning we paint what we see. Then, as we learn, we paint what we know, so that is painting the planes. And then you know what you see. So, yes, I don't see the mouth looking like this. I don't see the mouth without, I don't see this shape without the existence of the mouth. I see the whole thing completed in front of me, but I know what I'm seeing is this plane. This whole plane right here, turning side under here and then darker there. So after so many portrait paintings, I kind of developed this perception of the inner structures here, which I'm guiding you through. So it's going to get a little darker right under here, and a little bit, maybe a little bit cooler. So more ivory black into this mixture, and we're going to create this plane change here for the orbicularis oris. See that? Kind of like a sculpture again. Kind of like chiseling in that plane. We want to feel the entire volume of the mouth as we do this. Let's take some of the warmth from this area and darken it down here, because this shape is getting darker. Some more of that color here. Still kind of using different areas of the palette together. So we're getting more of a plane here. Let's get more of that. Some more of that going into here. And it gets a little lighter and cooler over here. And then again, see that? I'm taking from one puddle to the other. So I see that the combination of these two puddles might give me this shape here that I want. Now switching back to the smaller brushes, I want to go back in And again, try and reestablish the center of the lips. So now that we have all of this information worked out, it's going to be much easier to finally place where the lip is going to go. So the center and the corner. And remember that before I might have had it too far to the right, so I'm going to just leave this brushstroke here. Then let's just have a little shape here for the entire lip. Just a shape, simple shape like that. And this angles up a little bit. So these angles are very reminiscent of one another. Now switching to the light brush, we're going to add a little more light here to the top. And there's actually a little glimpse of light here. And let's let it trail down to here. Now back to the darks, I'm going to add a little more cadmium red, a little more ivory black. Let's get this corner of the mouth right there. Little divot for the middle of the mouth right here. And it follows a little higher up to this corner right here. And then we have the bottom. See how much easier it is to place these shapes on top of these structures that we indicated. The corner of the mouth might need to go a little bit further out. And this is also to show you that you don't have to, especially with oil paint, you don't have to nail something down perfectly the first time. I would like to relieve you from that pressure and know that you can continue to construct the likeness and the accuracy in this kind of way. So switching to the middle tone brush, let's get some of the pink. Just a little bit of pink right here. Oil paint is very forgiving, extremely forgiving. I'm going to go so far as to say it's your best friend. It really does allow you to continue to be indecisive for a while until you finally put your foot down on something. And then when you do, and it's in the relatively correct location, it's a very wonderful feeling. It's a little bit of a darker, deep red over here. And there's a little more light, so let's just use this light here. A little more light here on this bottom edge of the orbicularis oris. Just a little light there. And then let's make a more greenish red, or sorry, a more greenish dark. So a little bit yellow ochre into the ivory black. Let's take some of it off. So down here it's a little more greenish. Greenish is the key word, the ISH-ish, because it just kind of feels like it's more green. And that's kind of the intuition that you get after painting so many portraits or landscapes or still lifes. You kind of get an intuition of the color. So this comes up a little bit. And my intuition is telling me that this might have to go a little higher. So getting back into those deep reds, let's just push this shape up. So I'm going back and forth between the light brush and the dark brush. More like the middle tone brush and the dark brush. So let's push that even higher up. Something like that. And then to the light brush. So maybe the middle of the mouth needs to come a little further out. So a little further to the right of your screen. So let's flatten it for now. And then push it a little further out here to make sure that center line is still well established. Then it's lighter up here. And this is how we're constructing the angle of the lips and a little bit of the structure as well. And let's add a little more cadmium red to this area and get the light of the lip. This little light here doesn't take much. Now switching to the middle tone brush, I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit cooler. So the ivory black, the yellow ochre. Let's get into this puddle here and then mix it into this puddle here. And let's get this value existing somewhat down there. So the bottom of the orbicularis oris. A little more ivory black and yellow ochre. And that's a little bit closer. And then let's use this actually to relax the eyebrow a little bit, to change the expression, make it closer to the true expression. Notice how I kind of bounce from one thing to the other. It's the beauty of oil paint. It stays wet for a long time. Allows you to make many mistakes. So I'm trying to get the expression that she has. She's very calm and relaxed. So the eyebrows are a good way to try and get that type of mood. So maybe that peak of convexity went a little too sharp, so let's relax it a little bit. And then this little dark here actually. See how that kind of relaxes the expression a little bit. So back to the mouth. Let's go ahead with this same value and add this light for the lip. Very, very subtle. Very simple. Let's push it a little bit further out here. Let's take some of the paint off. Let's make a little squiggly motion there. And let this light trail across. So just letting it trail across. I'm going to use the fan brush. So it's starting to glare there. I'm going to switch to my my light brush for the size 4 Filberts. And there's a little more light here. It's a little bit more on the pinkish side than what I had. Very simple. And then it's a little bit cooler and a little bit more on the yellowish side for the corner of the mouth. Maybe something like this up here. See that? Very simple. Now it needs to be cooler even still, so ivory black, yellow ochre, lead white. Let's see if that does the trick. Kind of does. See how we're working from the inside out? Now we're approaching the corners, which is telling you soon we're going to be putting in that background color. Now I'm going to take a separate brush and dip it into my Stand Oil and Mineral Spirits mixture. So I'm going to use Ivory Black and a tad bit of Yellow Ochre. Let's say onto this puddle. A little bit more Ivory Black, a tad bit more Yellow Ochre. And this is going to be, hopefully, our background color. A little more Yellow Ochre. Something like that. Alright, so for the background now, I'm going to use it to help me further articulate the drawing. So let's see here. A little shape here, 1. Little corner here, 2. And then we have this little corner here, the eyelid, or shape here. So I'm trying to figure out my distances. So say on a vertical, is this distance correct? So is this distance here on a vertical correct in relation to this? Not sure. So I'm going to be using the background color to help solidify that. So a little shape here. And again, it's not going to blow up if you get something wrong. And I most likely will. So it's really just a push and pull of things. So this comes out to here. This comes in like this. Out like that. And remember, I said before, the nose kind of matches up with the corner of the side of the face. So here's the corner of the side of the face. So it's matching up with the nose. And let's see here. This shape here cuts in further over here. This corner of the orbicularis oris protrudes a little bit out. So a little shape like this. And this actually cuts in a little further down here. So I'm also looking at the negative shape, so the side of the lip in relation to the side of the background, so this little shape here. And now the chin is the part that protrudes out the furthest. Now remember, her head is tilted and tipped. So then the shape comes to about here. Using a vertical. So that should be good. And this of course wraps in here. Somewhat like that. Now with one continuous motion, let's try and get the outside shape again. It comes out like this. This cuts in here. This cuts in more over here. Goes out. See that? Taking you on a roller coaster ride. This cuts in here. Matches up with the side of the nose. Cuts in a little bit further out here. Curves back out. Cuts back in further here. Curves back out. And there you go. Now let's just fill in a little bit more of a shape for the background. Just a little simple shape. I don't want too much for the background here. Something like that. Just to get something in the background. So let's cut a little bit into here because there's not that much of the hair sticking up from there. Let's just cut into there. Now I'm going to switch to a different brush. So I'm going to switch to a brush that I'll use for the dark shape of the hair now. And remember before I kind of unified all of this? So I was really just thinking about this big shape like this. So now I'm going to come and add some more information into there. So I'm going to dip the brush into the Stand Oil Mineral Spirits mixture. And then dab it dry on some paper towel. Now I'm going to start off with Ivory Black. Let's mix down here. So Ivory Black and Cadmium Red. And let's use some of this this green here from the background. Something like that. Don't want to use straight black. So let's see how this value works. That might work. So let's first draw with it. So again, remember that corner of the hair is kind of reminiscent of this shape. So let's put that back in there. So there's the corner of the hair. This goes back up again. Then this goes out like this. And then depending on the application of the paint, you can actually kind of suggest the existence of the hair now. So here I'm going to just place this dark shape in here. And as I do this, I'm also considering the bandana that's on her head. So let's go place that dark in, leave some there for the dark of the bandana. And let's go ahead and place the corner of the ear somewhat like that. Now the side of the neck goes out there. Maybe a little bit further out. Then we have the neck. Actually need to cut it back a little further. So the brush that was used for the shadow should still have that mixture on it. Hopefully. And so while I'm doing this, I can actually adjust the shadow shape. So let's go ahead and make it a little darker and a little cooler. Something like this. And maybe not that cold. So more of the cadmium red. Notice how I'm using this whole puddle here. I just unified all of these puddles into a grand unification. So I theorized that this comes out like this, curves in like that. It's just my idea. Again, I don't really know until I have all of the information there to relate with. That is, all of these shapes established. So let's let this shape follow all the way up here now. This comes all the way up here. And remember that brush stroke that we used earlier for the zygomatic bone, the cheekbone? We're doing that all over again. Very simply. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply the rest of the paint here for this shape. And at the same time kind of articulating the shape a little bit further. This comes out something like this. This goes out like this, then comes down. Something like that. Now let's get rid of the glare. So this big fan brush is helping me eliminate the glare. So back to the shadow brush, I'm going to go ahead and soften this little transition here. And back to the fan brush. So the shadow needs to get a little darker and a little more warm. So back to the cadmium red, the ivory black. See if we can get the warmth back. It might be something like this. But again, I can't really know until everything is in relation to one another. So I have to make a shape like this and then stand back and see if it fits in relation to this shape. It's kind of starting to fit, so let's just apply it to the rest of these shapes here. And if you're wondering why I'm applying the paint in this kind of horizontal direction, it's just to minimize glare. Depending on your light source on your canvas or your panel, or whichever surface you're working on, there's usually kind of a direction that you can apply the brush strokes to minimize the glare. A little angle here now for more of a descriptive shape for the zygomatic bone. This cuts in more like that. Remember, we're not copying, we're interpreting. Not too much of a glare. Now again, I'm going to come back in with this shape. Try to get this dark value over here. And it might need to be a little cooler, so let's get into the white and the ivory black. Cool it down. Then apply it back to this mixture. Now let's apply the paint. Something like that. Back to the shadow brush. I'm going to try and add a little value here. Try and soften that edge. Something like that. I just want it to be a little softer up here. Then at the same time, let's take some of the paint from there and add some of the light that's showing on the hair. So with the light on the hair, I tend to use some of the flesh tones into the mixture. Notice I'm just kind of taking off the flesh tones. A little more off the flesh tone. So for this blue, since I don't have a blue, I'm going to just use the ivory black and the lead white. It creates a fairly gray mixture. And gray kind of tends to lean, at least this gray tends to lean towards blue. Let's just apply that on there. Just a simple shape for that. Don't need to add too much. I'm going to fan it out. See how the gray in relation to all of these colors is starting to look kind of blue? So now a little more ivory black. let's get some of the turning values of this bandana. So see how it's darker here because it's turning away from the light. Even darker still down there. Something like this. So now the darkest area of the painting is probably going to be here. Now remember I said you kind of have to know what to look for. In the photo reference, really everything here is kind of blasted, really dark. But in real life, this area behind the ear would probably be the darkest. And that is because it's the area that's facing the light the least. Because it's wrapping away and kind of hiding behind the hair. So let's just use ivory black and cadmium red. And more ivory black than cadmium red. Let's apply that dark. Now this is an area, if I had it, I would use alizarin just to sneak a little bit of warmth into the darks, but this should do. A little more cadmium red, ivory black. Just try to get that dark in there. Gonna fan it out. See how having this dark all of a sudden just adds more like air into this shadow. And so this shape I'm still kind of missing. So let's go back into these darks. Try to get it to work. Come something up like this. Let's fan it out. Though it may look like I'm painting this completely in one fell swoop, I am taking breaks actually. So I just came back from a break and I saw that this shape here for the chin needs to cut in a little bit more. So I'm going to cut it in a little bit more like that. And even a little more here. So I tell you what, it's a good idea, even if you're painting an alla prima, like a one sitting portrait, to take breaks as much as you can. And being away even for a couple minutes can help you see things like that need to be adjusted. And even this corner here is too sharp. This is a little more round, so another straight line here to create that curve. And this ridge is coming out too far, so this comes out maybe like that. So I'm going to switch back and forth now between the shadow. So let's remix that shadow. So we're going to use cadmium red, ivory black. So let's see if we get that value back. So good, we have that value. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and forth between the dark light here and the shadow. So let's get the halftone brush here. Now I do mix my brushes up once in a while, so this may have been a lighter value before, but that's alright. So let's see here, let's see if this value can work. And I think it can, so I'm going to use this value here as a dark light. So what's the dark light? The dark light is the area in the light that is the closest to the shadow. That's all it is. And it is the shape that creates the curvature of the form. It creates the illusion of the form turning away into the shadow. And it's a little warmer, so let's add some more, say something from here into this shape. Just like that. It might be too dark now, so let's pick up some of this paint. Let's actually add some more of this area. A little bit more yellow. So a little bit more yellow into this mixture. Now it's too warm. It's too light, so let's get some of this. Mix it into that. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Notice I'm taking from one puddle to the other, even at this stage still. So I'm going to go ahead and push that value even darker now. Now I have to step back. And it seems to fit. So let's soften this edge even more. Fan brush. So the fan brush is going to get rid of the glare. Now let's go ahead and continue creating this dark light. We want it to be crisp and clear, so let's go ahead and make sure that that shadow delineation holds. So the important thing about the dark light, I think, is to make sure that the distinction between the light and the shadow is not lost. So again, back to the dark light brush. Let's add that value here now. And let's add a little more cadmium red, because it's getting a lot darker and a lot more red over here. A bit warmer over there. Now back to the shadow. Let's pull this shape out a little further. See how I'm kind of bouncing back between the two? So let's make it a little cooler. So let's just take this puddle. Let's push this up. Very light touch. Now I noticed that this shadow needs to come up a little bit further. So just a little bit higher up here. And let's soften this little transition as we do that. Just a little bit softer. I'm going to allow this paint here to cover over here, just to get rid of the blank panel that was showing there. And I'm going to go for a darker, and let's say a little bit warmer value right under here for the ramus of the jaw. This little corner here where the jaw, where the mandible starts to turn. Let's just push the color there a little bit. Just a little bit warmer and a little darker. Maybe a little darker, a little more ivory black into this little corner here. Now I'm going to add this little swooping light here. I'm going to actually clean off this brush with some of the mineral spirits. So I'm just dipping it into the mineral spirits, and then I'm going to dab it dry on the paper towel. So now I'm going to go back into this area of the palette and a little more of the yellow ochre. And again, I'm letting the colors that are already on there mix into the brush, and it's okay. And I tell you what, I'm trying to use a lot less medium with my paintings recently. Notice I only mentioned I used my stand oil mineral spirits pretty much whenever I grabbed a new brush, and then after that I did not use it. So there's a little plane here on the top of the nose, right here. So again, like a sculptor with their chisel, I'm going to chisel out a plane here. Something like that. I guess a little more pink. A little more pink, but not that much red. So a little bit more pink here. A little more pink right there. And then I'm noticing that this little side plane is a little more orange. So let's add a little more orange. So the yellow ochre into this pink that we already have. Let's let the brush go a little bit further down so that we can make the value a little bit more deep. And so let's apply, and it's too red. So a little more yellow ochre and the lead white. Let's take some of this color here just to get rid of the intensity of that orange. It's not that bright. Let's see if this works. So I have to make this sharp shape and then stand back. So it might be a little darker, a little less intense. So let's see how this works. I'm going to apply the shape and stand back. Starting to get there, so I'm going to go back to this puddle. Take some of this. And it's getting progressively lighter as we get closer to this plane. So let's add that in there. Just a little bit lighter. Something like that. Let's add some more of the pink. Let's take some paint from this puddle. Let's see how it transitions into the nose. We can call this plane kind of like a bridge between this plane and this plane. Use the fan brush. And again, I'm going to add a little more light to the top of the nasal bone. So this little shape here is getting more light. Oftentimes in an area like that, a single brush stroke can do. Now let's add some more information into the shape for the bandana. So let's see, let's go over here. And just the ivory black on top of this puddle that's right here. So let's create a little edge here for the bandana. An edge on this side, and let's go on the other side. A little edge on this side now. Back to the fan brush. And I tell you what, while we're on this side of the portrait, remember this piece of paper towel that I was going to use as an eraser that I don't really think I used? I'm just going to use it to soften this transition. See that little shape for the side of the hair? I didn't want it to be razor sharp. I know it's just touching the panel, but I want it to be a little softer. So let's switch to the fan brush. Try to make sure that that edge stays soft. Maybe we can leave it sharper here, but still softer down there. So this is pretty much an aesthetic thing. Just aesthetically, we don't want one corner of the portrait to be uniformly the same edge quality. I didn't want the whole thing to be cut out sharp. Now back to the bandana. Let's add a little bit more of a dark shape here. I'm going to add just a little bit of information for the detail on the bandana. So let's start out with the obvious, some of the red. So I'm going to go in with the middle tone brush, the little size 1 round. And again, if you want to know exactly which brushes and which materials I'm using, that information is going to be typed up in the description box below. So let's get a little red. Let's see, there's a red up here. A little red here. You ever see the flowers or the water lilies that Monet painted? I actually really like Monet's work, so let's do some impressionistic little touches here. A little bit of red there. And let's make a darker red. So the ivory black with the cadmium red. Maybe not that much darker. Yeah, just something like that. So now we have our little touches of red. Then the next obvious thing is those little light petals there. I mean, obvious is relative. So let's make a little bit of yellow ochre, some ivory black, and just that. So let's see. I see 2 little dots here. And then I see maybe about 4 here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. As long as the value doesn't jump out, I just don't want anything in the bandana to take away from the portrait. So let's add a little more yellow ochre. A little more ivory black. Let's get a little bit of a green. Pretty much a grayed out yellow, but let's just say it's green. So let's add this over here. And a little touch of it over here. A little touch of it here. And a little touch of it here. Let's add some of it over here. And over here. And let's add a little lighter strand over here. And here. I'm going to switch to the fan brush to get rid of any glare I may have added. Now I'm actually going to go ahead and thin the brush that I'm using by adding a little bit of my medium. I'm going to reach into this area of the palette and let's see. I'm going to draw in the neck now. So maybe a little more green, so let's go on this side of the palette. Something like that. So the neck, we have a little angle down here. This goes down here. Start off with just this little shape here. This goes a little bit down here. And let's make it a little darker, so let's pick some of this off. Also kind of brings down the saturation, which is nice. So let's get this shape here now. This goes in, goes up like that. And this goes down. Now again, let's make it lighter, so let's pick some of the paint off of here. And now we're getting a little lighter. And it's going to get a little darker as we approach the clavicle. So a little darker here and darker back here. And now I see that this shadow, I may have cut a little too much into it. So going back to the shadow brush, it's a little too warm. Let's get some of this mixture. Let's just reestablish that shadow shape. Cuts in something like this. This actually goes lower. Something like that. I have to stand back. This cuts in a little bit here. I'm going to use the fan brush. Now switching back to the flesh tones here. So it's a little lighter actually, right above the clavicle. So a little lighter right up here. Kind of like a top plane for the clavicle. And I'm going to consider this all a vignette. And I usually incorporate vignettes into my portrait demonstration. So vignette is an area of the painting that is a little less finished than another area. So this area is going to be less finished than this area to kind of complement the information we put in here. So it's pretty much an aesthetic thing. So a little dark here for the clavicle. I'm going to make it too dark first. Now I'm going to come back in with the light. Add a little light here. Then we have a little top plane of the clavicle there. Then it curves into here. So all of this is lighter and a little more pink. So let's add some of this now. See that? Very simply. And I'm purposely going in this kind of shape here and maybe adding a little too much to the corners because I'm going to cut back into that with the shirt. So I'm thinning out the paint a little bit with my mineral spirits. Now I'm just going to just kind of sketch the rest of this shape in here. Pretty much just took what was on the palette to get this. So now with the background brush, I'm going to come back in and create the shape for the shirt. But very much going to be a vignette for the shirt. Not going to try to put too much information for that. Just enough to get it to read like something's on here. Gonna thin it out a little bit with my Stand Oil Mineral Spirits mixture. And let's see. Goes over here. Curves down here, then goes straight out here. And this shape here cuts in a little bit right there, pulls out, and pushes in at a little less of a severe angle. And now let's do the vignette thing. So let's just push some of the paint out here. very stylized, but kind of fun to make these little shapes like this and let some of the brushstrokes show. And let's let one brushstroke here continue to kind of suggest the rest of the shoulder. I'm also going to mention the contour of the side of the face. The edge of the contour is actually pretty important. So with the fan brush, I actually soften this edge of the side of the face unintentionally, but that's actually what I wanted. I wanted this area to be a little bit softer and this area to be a little bit more sharp and a little more crisp, because I want the focus to be closer to the eyes. I want the focus to be closer to here, and I want this area to be more soft and a little less focused. So that was kind of just a little coincidence or happy accident, whatever you want to call it. But in any case, the contours, just be mindful not to make the contours the same sharpness or the same degree of softness throughout the entire picture. And with that, we have this week's portrait painting demonstration. I hope it helps you out. It was a lot of fun to use the Zorn palette again. Again, I really enjoy using the Zorn palette for portraiture and figurative work. It is a very amazing thing to really be able to get so many variations of flesh tones using just 4 colors. Just 4 colors. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I will see you on the next video.